Hi, it's Tamara here with a fun colouring and card making tutorial. As well as the excitement of starting my own YouTube channel this year, I was thrilled to be invited to join the Sweet November Stamps review team. So in celebration of this, I've made this video showing my first DT post. I'll be doing some heat embossing, ink blending and some Copic colouring. So let's get started. I've chosen the cute image called Peppy, as he looks as excited as me when I received the message from Sweet November Stamps to join the team. I'm going to be using him as the second Y in the word yay, so I want to do an ink blended section on my card front and heat emboss some snowflakes. I've grabbed my large roll of purple tape and using the grid pattern on my glass mat, I will line up the tape to make a strip. I'm just going to be using the letter dies to work out roughly how much space I'll need. So I'll just secure that down to the top, making sure it's as straight as possible with those grid lines. Then I'll grab my second piece of tape and just place it along the bottom. Just make sure I haven't moved that and just line it up with that line and give that a good press down. Now I've grabbed my Misti and already taken out the black sponge base, as I'll be using the MFT Snowflake Flurry rubber background stamp. I'll be placing my card panel into the Misti and just ensure that it is as centered as possible so that you'll get the full impression of the background stamp. I'm just using my tape to hold that in place. We'll put a bit of anti-static powder onto this section that we'll be stamping, just to ensure that none of the white heat embossing powder goes where we don't want it. So just give that a really good dusting of powder in the section. So I'm going to be grabbing my Versamark Watermark stamp pad and just stamping up the section that will cover the strip. And we'll give that a good press down to make sure we can get a good impression of our snowflakes. And I'll give it another go with the Versamark. Just making sure I get really good coverage for the powder to stick to. Give that another press down. Give it a rub to try and make sure we get a good impression. And that looks good. I've grabbed out my A4 folded piece of printer paper that I like to use whenever I'm using my embossing powder. I'll be using Stampendous white embossing powder today, so I will just sprinkle that onto the panel and just give that a light dust off. I always like just to go over a second time just to make sure you've got good coverage, and that way I can just use that folded up paper just to slide the excess powder back into my bottle. I've grabbed my precision tip reverse tweezers just to hold onto the panel, and I've preheated my heat gun tool. I always like to take it to the back of the panel first. It just kind of sets anything and maybe makes any loose particles come off before actually taking the heat tool to the embossing side. And then we'll just run that over the panel until that's all heat embossed. Using my Make Art station to hold my heat emboss panel, I'll be doing some emboss resist ink blending using Distress Oxides, Spun Sugar, Kitsch Flamingo and Peacock feathers. I'm using my domed sponge applicators to apply small sections of each colour in circular motions to ensure that we get a smooth blend between each one. So I've started off with the Spun Sugar and went with the Kitsch Flamingo, and then obviously went back to the Spun Sugar to make that a smooth blend between those two colours. Now using the Kitsch Flamingo over the top of the Peacock feathers, you can sometimes get some colour of the Peacock feathers on your sponge, so I always like to get another sponge out, a clean one, and just reapply the Kitsch Flamingo colour, and that way you're not transferring any of that peacock feathers onto that portion of the pink. And we'll finish off with the Spun Sugar, and now we'll pull off the tape and do the big reveal, which I always love. Making sure we just do that gently so we don't get any bits that break off. And perfect. So that's the panel finished, so I'll set that aside to dry. I was initially going to keep my letters white, but I thought that they would most probably pop more if they had some colour to them. So I've grabbed out my Copics in BG78, BG53 and BG11. I think I'll get a nice ombre effect, and I thought this would reflect back nicely to the peacock feathers that I've used in the card panel. So I've started off at the bottom with my BG78 and just working through with my BG53 over the top of that. And I'm coming back in with the second coat on the bottom with the BG78 and just using the tip-to-tip method with the BG78 and BG53 to get a nice smooth blend. And I'm going to do the same with the BG53 and the BG11 to again get a nice smooth blend between. And then just to soften up the top of that BG11, I'm just using my colourless blender to smooth that out. So I'll just leave you with some music now while I colour up Peppy. I've grabbed out my Misti again and a piece of black scrap cardstock, and I'll be using this Commencing Happy Dance stamp for my sub-sentiment. It's from the MFT Anything But Basics Birthday Wishes stamp set, and because Peppy reminded me a little bit of Happy Feet, and I was also doing a happy dance when I was asked to be a DT, I thought that would be perfect for this card. So I've just put a bit of anti-static powder down and just using my Versamark just to stamp that sentiment out again. I've grabbed my printer paper and my embossing powder, and we'll just give that a double go and tap that out, and then we'll get that heat embossed. Just going to wipe off the excess powder off the sentiment before I cut it out. Just going to use this banner die, but I'm actually going to just trim off the end, so I just want to try and make that as centered as possible. So I'll tape that down and take that over to my die cutting machine. So that's all cut out, so we'll pull this off, and then I'll just be wanting to trim off those edges. So I'll just grab my Tim Holtz trimming tool and we'll just give those a trim. So I just want a little bit of space at the end of each word. So just line that up and just give that a quick trim. And that's the sentiment. Off camera, I've actually cut out the Y and A another 3 times and already glued them together. I was wanting to get a little bit of dimension in the letters without having to use 3D foam because I will be popping up Peppy when we put him on the card front. So I'm just going to glue the letters that we coloured in the ombre effect, just to glue them on top of those already die cut letters, just making sure that that's lined up as close as possible and there's no excess glue coming out. And then we'll do the letter A. So I'll be using a blue card base measuring 9 3/4 by 6 inches, and I'll be attaching the front panel to the front, just leaving a small blue border around the front of the card. And I've already popped some 3D foam tape on Peppy, and I'm going to place the sub-sentiment just underneath where the inked panel is. So we'll just glue that directly to the card front. Just lining that up so there's a small amount of white space between the ink blended strip and the sentiment, making sure that's straight. Now I'm wanting this yay to be spaced out, so evenly spaced. So I'll just roughly place where I'm wanting it. You can get out your ruler and measure, but I'm just going to eyeball it today. So I always like to attach the middle letter first, because I find then you can adjust your other letters to match. So we'll just line that A up in the center, give that a good press down, making sure that's all adhered. And now we'll attach the Y, just ensuring that the Y is the same length away that Peppy is. So I'll pop some glue on there and pop that on the front, lining that up to be centered. So I might just grab a ruler and just make sure the Y is lining up with that A on the bottom. So it is a little bit low, so we'll push that Y up a little bit. My A is slightly crooked, but I don't think you'll notice. Just it's a bit down on the right hand side. Otherwise that looks good. And now we'll pop Peppy on the front. So we'll get rid of the release paper. And we'll attach him just to the right. I always just like to check first before I give him a good push down. So I think he just needs to go over just slightly. And I want him kind of 1 foot at the bottom of the strip and want his hand up the top. So that looks good. So we'll give that a press down. So this is the finished card for this tutorial. I think Peppy is absolutely gorgeous and he was so fun to colour up, and I think you could use him for a multitude of different cards. He's just such a happy character. I hope you have enjoyed today's tutorial. Please leave a comment and press the like button if you did, and I'd love for you if you could subscribe. Have a great day. Bye.